Welcome to Portals of Perception and to the Universalis project episode number 6. In episode number 5, we developed the scaffolds to be able to approach on this one the epoch culmination story. I'm here partnered with Karen and Kyriaki. Anything you'd like to offer as a bridging from our scaffolding conversation to this conversation as a beginning launch into this journey?
Yeah, just to say there's a comment that there is so much that we know that we don't know and concerning knowledge. So looking forward to the next steps.
Yes, to say that a scaffold isn't a ladder. It's multiple overlays and has to be thought of in many dimensions.
Indeed. So we attempted in the 5th episode to build some of those foundational layers about knowledge and to just recapitulate it very, very quickly. Yes, the Universalis project number 6, the epoch culmination story. These are questions we layered at the beginning to get us into the space we are now about to explore. How do we come to know what we believe we know? What about our ancestors, the people in the ancient world? What can we sense? What can we intuit? What can we decode? What can we decipher about their way of accessing knowledge? And we reflected in a previous episode on the 3 portals of knowing: the sensory, the mental, and spiritual. And we are now about to proceed into describing the epoch, and then at the end describing the program of the epoch through the lens of the different capacities coming online. That's what we are about to attempt to do. We used these 2 images to invite an integration of a scientific paradigm that appreciates the refraction of the 7-fold phenomena, and to integrate alongside it a different esoteric, initiatory appreciation of the covenant of life on planet Earth, made possible in the unique ecology that's created here, enabled by sun and sunlight. And we skated to the place of being prepared to embrace these 2, what often in the world would appear to be conflicting paradigms, but in the world are not very much conflicting, because the scientific paradigm is laughing the esoteric or the ancient or the initiatory, the initiated philosophical, spiritual frame of discovery out of the room. And we said, can we actually integrate both? And we used these images to invite the miracle of learning of the toddler. And can we integrate that miracle alongside the more traditional adult linear learning, often learning by rote, which is so much slower. And we are now embarking on the story of the epoch using the sevenfold structure. And I want to try and frame this by saying the following. There are several development models that have been popularized in recent decades, and they're all very helpful and wonderful. They often use different color frameworks, more as a map to codify the concepts in the framework, in the development framework. We're actually approaching this in a different way. There is an appreciation that the sevenfold structure, the septenary, the rainbow, is a phenomena that describes life. And that therefore, in anything that is naturally emerging, naturally arising, it will bring to itself and it will unfold and evolve through certain natural phases. And we are proposing that there is a way in which we can see the natural story of a life from birth all the way to the end of life, and the change that occurs at the end of life is a journey through those 7 wavelength natures, and that it's not, even that is not linear, because one could actually look at every year and see the 7 in every year, and we each get to participate not just in one sevenfold progression, but in many, all at the same time, in our relationships, in our families, in the endeavors that we lead. And the invitation, the first thing I'm about to try to establish, is looking at the rainbow through these lenses as a way of representation of the process, the complete process, a complete natural process of organic life. And I will establish this after making firstly the point that we are looking to describe some elements about the epoch transition, the transition of the epoch in the visible world, in the way we can track. And even that, as we do so, it will actually not be linear in history, because we will attempt to describe the 7 natures as potencies and natures that are all showing up at the beginning of an epoch, at the origin point, and then they each have a function, they bring a certain function online at a particular time. And the particular focus we will bring to mind here is the near-term epoch. The 3,500 years, the 3,500 years, the recent epoch, we're not tracking now more ancient prehistoric epochs, that they belong in a different story, a different time, and carry an important foundational root system into this epoch that we are now at the finalizing culmination of, the 3,005 years that we're tracking. And the paradigm that, or the contemplation that we invite, is very much based on this idea that we suggested on the 5th conversation, which is that there is more to life then emerging from matter, from the atomic and molecular structure, to gradually build complex systems like the human body, and that we refute the scientific belief that consciousness is simply something that becomes an emergent property because of the complexification of organic life. We would like to propose that the covenant of life includes blessing realms, causing realms that we broadly call the more than human realms. And that we were never on our own, never flying on our own here. That human life is always accompanied by supreme purpose, the core essence, purposeful intent of the universe, which is not necessarily just us, the people that are here now, or even this human model, but the project of the universe to give rise to life, and then for life to give rise to conscious life, life that can be conscious of itself and then grow to become conscious of the universe at large. I believe this today is a scientific fact that can be told in a variety of different ways. We are not making here any new religious claims, although we will trace the epoch and will make a special place for the arising of religions. This is not a new religion by any stretch of imagination, and not any leap of faith or belief. Rather, it is a deeply researched and well-founded contemplation of the evidence of human life and the trace of events that we are now at the leading edge of throughout all the ages. And we will mention some names and highlight some of that. And what it also is, and this is going to stretch the reductionist perspective of life and of the universe and of history, which is why we took time on the 5th episode to describe the 7 modern agents that oppress and curtail the natural intuition and the capacity of the human faculty to come to know in other ways other than just by exterior measure using the instruments of the telescope and the microscope and the laboratory of experimentation, recognizing that the most profound universal laboratory is the human system. And true, science brought us the gift of debunking a lot of superstition and a lot of unhealthy, debasing practices in the past. It also left us largely bereft of the profound gift of the richness of the inner human capacities, the spiritual portal, the higher intuition, the more rarefied and refined sense organs of resonance and clairvoyance and clairknow. And those capacities that get switched on in the human and are supported and verified by the study of the natural laws, and how there is forever a possibility for retraceability, in that whatever body of knowledge we seek to unlock it cannot just be told as a wishful thinking. It needs to ground itself in certain core natural principles, natural laws that enable its verification, such that, as we said, if you're going to go to the top floor on the Empire State Building to get the beautiful view, scenic view of New York, you've built all these foundations such that the elevator could actually go up there, and more importantly, sometime will be able to go down and arrive safely and go back to the street view, so you can see the view from above and then integrate back to the city, to the busy New York life, and mix with your fellow humans, even if they've never been on the top of the Empire State Building and have not had the view of the city. They will still be as important, as valuable as your brothers and sisters, human on a journey. And the fact that there is a perspective and or a perception that one can acquire doesn't mean that puts you in a position to be better than anybody else. So a lot of what has been misused in the past, generally with knowledge, and specifically with esoteric knowledge, has been misused by application of a certain personalized or commercial or political or other type agenda, and we have no agenda whatsoever of that kind. The other way around, we actually say that Kyriaki, as you offered, sometimes the very educated know less about life and the struggle of life and what we come to know through struggle and pain and love and devotion. So what we are with that asserting that when we think about the epoch transition and the more than human realms, we're really beginning to sense that the way we study history has never been complete, because we mostly study the written story in books, which more than anything is featuring the victor and the vanquished. Mostly the people that got to write history are the victors. But the story often, in one way or another, includes some version of the vanquished too. So, and it's not a mistake that this is his story, because part of the calamitous and murderous nature of the epoch has very much, not completely, but by a good 99% of the time, has been done at the hand of men. And all that at a different time will come back to address about the patriarchy and the line that impact history in this way. What we are specifically seeking to address here is to say that the way we are looking to unfold the story of the epoch is through the integration of his story and her story. His story is the story of what is dead. Her story is the story of what's alive, because the planet is alive, and the energetic content of the experiences that have emerged in the story of the epoch are still alive. And we may have a way of sensing them, connecting to them, decoding them, deciphering them, by applying those portals of knowing, portals of perception that are available for human life. So we will also endeavor to weave into the story the third dimension, which is the human response to both. The human response to the visible dimension of the story that's told about the rise and fall of cultures, the rise and fall of fashions, the rise and fall of paradigms, the rise and fall of systems. All these are part of the epoch transition, and we will touch very briefly a few elements. And the human response to those elements, and the human, even before and during and with, respond to the invisible, to the hair story, to the invisible realms, in terms of those different faculties that come online. And in this sense, we are describing the human response as the initiatory developmental journey. So the story of the epoch is the three-dimensional story, at the very least, story of the events that we know of history and the names we know and so on and so forth. It's the story of the invisible realm that enveloped people through these times, that motivated them, that inspired them, that inferred and transferred knowledge to them, and that were part of the initiatory developmental influence that, very much in the way I described, the soul helps the toddler crawl and stand and walk. And you could therefore genuinely say that there is a teleology in the development of the toddler, such that the toddler is on the trajectory to become a fully functioning, independent adult. We will make the radical assertion that the soul of the epoch, if we can use this term, is there to initiate and help the human develop along the journey. I know if you just journeyed with me up to this moment with the scientific mind, you are probably gonna say, we left you behind now, or you left us. Come along for the ride with us, discover the next leg of the journey. How about if you try this as a contemplation? How about if you ask yourself, what if this was the case? Just as a way of inquiring contemplatively by imagining the possibility of that, imagining that we are never on our own, forever accompanied by the realms that bring to us very special care and very special assistance. And then the recognition that once we are prepared to embrace the story in this way, there is really truly a genuine, authentic, fully embodied whole human progression and development and evolution, such that the human of the ancient world and the human of today is not quite the same human. And if we did have a time machine, which we don't, and we could take a person from the 2nd century BC or the 3rd century AD and bring them in time machine to today and place them in the middle of New York or Athens or London or Seattle, they will most likely suffer an immediate nervous breakdown and or cardiac arrest, or both. Their system would simply not be able to handle all the impression of the world around them. So the human of today is not only a human that has the perspective of all that the modern project brought to us in terms of the wonderful and profound scientific discoveries, it is also a human that neurologically and brain-wise is different, because it has gone through such a dramatic evolutionary process. And, oh, by the way, if I described in the previous conversation, the soul as an intelligence loom that orchestrates the human to be able to navigate this ecology. So the soul of today acquired updated operating system that was not available in those ancient times, because guess what? The youngsters of today need to very earlier on in their life be able to negotiate smartphones and the internet. We are the generation that went through this leap in experience. They were already initiated into it. So these are changes that are easier to monitor through the story of the evolution of the epoch. And very much as our generation is capable of telling of the profound change that occurred with the rise of the internet and then smartphones, and we're able to offer the commentary that nowhere before, never before has there been a species that adapted and evolved and changed its mode of communication so quickly as we have. You can go back in time and read testimonies of people experiencing the first television and people witnessing the first automobiles and describing how automobiles being driven at 15 or 20 miles per hour made people dizzy. So these are changes that are triggered in the exterior world, in the world of matter, in the world of technology, and we are comfortable with that story. We're comfortable with the story that the predominance of the transition of the epoch around us and the evolution of that story over the last 200 years has been mostly industrial, technological, and then in recent decades, more in the advanced technology of computing, the internet, the cloud, and all the rest of it. So it's easier for us to narrate that story of change. We are proposing the changes occurred before that, and the changes occurred while that was occurring, all in the invisible realms that accompany life. And that in fact, all those technological breakthroughs, they couldn't happen without the assisting realms providing the human the capacity to imagine a neural system like the internet. So that when we tell the Universalis story, and we describe that part of the prospect of Universalis is the human is being initiated to embrace the universe at large, there is in that the invitation and the recognition that the advent of the internet and the evolution of the last several decades is occurring concurrently with that, and is in fact, I'm proposing the technological translation and instantiation of a permission that a permission, a blueprint, a gifting, an affordance perhaps of the more than human realms that bless human life and get often mostly expressed in the technological materialistic realm, because that's where we've been so emphasized in recent centuries and in recent decades. The reason for our conversation here is we believe that the remainder of the century and the coming centuries, the next 2-3 centuries, they're about the human reintegrating in a whole new way the more than human realms and reactivating in a much fuller way the spiritual portal, and that part of that is the initiation and the development of all those capacities who are coming online. So we therefore frame the question, how has knowledge and the human capacity to perceive, internalize, and appreciate evolved through the epoch? That's going to be the human response story to the first two other dimensions. And even that is a simplified rendering, because in actuality, the visible and the invisible are not two separate realms. They are interpenetrating realms. The visible is filled with the invisible, and the invisible, when it finds a circumstance, interpenetrates and bleeds into the visible and is supported, anchored by the visible. So that was a way to precede and seed the epochal story that we are coming to. Now, to get there, I recognize that I first want to offer the more simplified blueprint of the sevenfold structure, sevenfold program, sevenfold process of evolution in the way you may choose to be able to track in your own personal life, in your own biographical experience, in your own relationship, in even any commercial or business endeavor or spiritual or communal endeavor you're involved in. Because what we are essentially saying, anything that is birthed and brought to life in this ecology and domain we call planet Earth will naturally follow the sevenfold evolution process. And in that, red is symbolized, or not symbolized, red holds, codifies the origination point, the point of origin. When something begins, when something is experiencing its birth, when something is just arising. That is when we flow with a sevenfold structure, the significance of red. It's the beginning point, the origin, which is then followed by orange and the functional nature of the fractal of orange. It comes to support, it comes to nourish, it comes to expand. It comes to take the originating issue and expand its territory. Expand the support system for that territory. Expand the range. All that is part of what the orange does in this sevenfold process. And after the expansion of orange comes yellow, and what yellow does, now that the territory was dramatically expanded and integrated or involved spaces that were before not part of it, it now needs to be realigned, needs to be reorchestrated. Often in the context of finding a new organizing principle, new higher organizing principle, new unifying principle that will rewire, realign, reorchestrate the territory, the space, the domain to what it is for now. So if you use this for a minute in the context of a story of a startup company, because that also follow that. So there is some idea to launch a startup. They develop quickly the first prototype and bring it to market as quickly as possible to gain quickly some learning from the market. And now they are accelerating the growth into new possibilities. And sooner or later, but mostly sooner, they need to reorganize themselves in terms of recodifying their mission. What are we about? What is core for us? And what is out of core that should not necessarily be part of our central mission. That's a yellow phase in the life cycle, the evolution of a company. And green is the time when we've been journeying for a while and now we're getting tired or getting fatigued or having used up the energy of the originating inspiration and even used up the energy of the updated mission that we codified in yellow. And now we need to find a way to renew ourselves, to regenerate ourselves, to find new inspiration, to find new ways of what we did before, or do what we did before in new ways, or do new things altogether. All that is part of the renewal and the regeneration that appears with green. And in a person's life, that sometime will occur. So I'm saying in the life of a company, there is one way to trace this, the life of human journey. So the realignment and the reorchestration is something that will occur sometime in the mid to late 20s or sometime the early 30s, when that young adult now chooses to take responsibility to their life and build their own family. So they move from the family of origin to building their own family that they are creating. That, if you like, is the yellow dimension in the journey of human life. And then they go through midlife crises and they need to renew and regenerate themselves. And we traced through that earlier in portals, and those conversations can be found. And then it leads us to blue, because when we integrate new inspiration that brought renewal and regeneration, and we have now expanded and grown in all sorts of new directions, there is a need to balance all those and build a system that can facilitate and support and regulate and maintain a healthy, sound, and robust way of operating. And that is true in every process. And then if the endeavor is lucky enough to enter the grace phase of the indigo, and sometimes it will get there quicker, depends on the circumstance. It will reach the point where it looks to integrate with a new larger system and merge and transfer its know-how inside it. Now, it becomes obvious when it will become obvious when we will trace it in the epochal context. But even before the epochal context, that this is truly not a linear process, because sometime as you originate, there is a bit of realignment even in the earlier arising. So there is some of the yellow that appears there. And then there is resistance that's met even in the earlier phases. So some of the renew and the regenerate appears right there at the beginning. So I am telling the very simplified narration of the sevenfold process. It's very important to recognize that, as I'll show in a minute in another visual, the fractal of the full sevenfold system appears inside each of the seven. So it's a fractal within a fractal within a fractal. All the way to the codification of violet, in the idea that when something reaches its end, whether it dies, when the tree in the forest dies, it goes through the process of rotting, so it gets reintegrated to the ground, so there is a phase shift there. We humans, in our cultural and business and institutions and spiritual endeavors, in all the many dimensions of life, we don't have to always, like a tree, disintegrate. There are other ways where humanity throughout the ages where a great culture reached its peak and then began to sunset, and as it did, some elements of it re-emerged in the phase shift, such that we today continue to celebrate the miraculous gifts of the ancient Greek culture, its philosophy, its art, its architecture. Some of its core ideas permeated throughout the ages, even into today, some of its core philosophies. And that's part of the story we're about to tell. So that's the simplified sevenfold process. Nothing quite yet about the epoch, although we will see that the epoch very much follows that journey. You begin with red in the origin point when something arises, then it expands and needs larger support, and then it needs to realign and reorchestrate itself and find a new purpose and mission. And then it needs to renew and regenerate itself. Then it needs to regulate and balance and systematize itself, such that it is ready to integrate and merge and transfer until such time as it reaches a phase shift. And, you know, if you take the example of still business, I've consulted to several family businesses, and one of their indigo violet phases. So what happens when a family founded a very successful business and then they need to move it to second generation and to third generation? The big conundrum of some of the old money, the old wealth in the world, is that it has been stored by family lines. They've developed a lot of knowledge about the transfer that needs to occur, to generational transfer, such that the ethos and the purpose and the mission and the ethics and the philosophy and the values that were in the founding is still transferred even in a modern world. That's the conundrum, just at that line of business that's appearing through the sevenfold process. How do they guarantee the integrity of the mission of what they came to serve in a rapidly changing and shape-shifting world? And sometimes the next generation is not prepared to embrace that, and hence the endeavor falls apart. So there is a tremendous amount of know-how into many domains of life. We could use this describe this as I just did in the context of business, strategy and consulting. We could talk about human health and mental health through the sevenfold structure. We could talk about education. And we're choosing now to talk about the epoch and the rise and fall of great cultures in that journey. So now, the sevenfold epoch fractal and its culmination. And thank you for bearing with me. My sense is I need to do the whole thing, or else we will be here for 10 hours. And this is that one window where we're going to try and capture this story together. Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.